What happens when a simple check-in at a luxury hotel turns into an explosive confrontation that exposes deep-seated prejudice and shatters assumptions? Imagine this. A black woman walks into the grand lobby of one of the city's most prestigious hotels, her heels clicking against the marble floor as heads turn. She's dressed impeccably, tailored blazer, sleek handbag slung over her shoulder, but it doesn't take long for things to go horribly wrong. Within minutes, she finds herself face-to-face with a staff member whose sneer says more than words ever could. The tension is palpable, electric, like the air before a storm breaks. And then it happens, a slap, sharp and shocking, followed by harsh words meant to humiliate. But what no one in that room knows yet is that tucked inside her bag lies something that will flip the script entirely. The keycard to the presidential suite. The scene unfolds in real time, every second dripping with hostility. Her name is Maya Thompson, a 32-year-old marketing executive who has worked tirelessly to get where she is today. This trip was supposed to be about celebrating, not just her recent promotion but also the culmination of years of sacrifice and resilience. Instead, she now stands there, stunned, heart pounding in her chest as the echoes of the slap reverberate through the cavernous space. "You don't belong here," the man spits out, his voice laced with venom. It's not just the physical assault or the verbal barrage that cuts deep. It's the look in his eyes, the way he dismisses her as if she were invisible, unworthy. For a moment, Maya feels small, cornered, unsure how to respond. But beneath the surface, something stirs, a quiet fire fueled by indignation and pride. As chaos swirls around her, Maya reaches instinctively for her bag, fingers brushing against the smooth plastic of the keycard hidden within. In that split second, clarity washes over her. This isn't just about her anymore. It's about every person who has been made to feel less than because of the color of their skin. With deliberate calm, she pulls out the card and holds it up, letting the silence stretch until it becomes unbearable. "Does this mean I still don't belong?" she asks, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. The room freezes, all eyes on her, waiting to see what happens next. The hotel lobby is a picture of opulence, all gleaming chandeliers and plush velvet furniture that screams wealth. Sunlight streams through towering glass windows, casting golden hues across the polished marble floors. Guests mill about, some chatting quietly while others tap away on their phones, oblivious to the drama unfolding near the front desk. The air smells faintly of expensive perfume and freshly brewed coffee from the nearby cafe. But none of that matters right now. Not to Maya, not to the man who just slapped her, and certainly not to the small crowd beginning to gather around them. Whispers ripple through the space like a current, curious eyes darting between Maya and the red-faced staff member whose name tag reads, Greg. Maya's heart pounds so hard she can feel it in her throat. She clutches the key card tighter, its edges digging into her palm as if reminding her of its presence. Her mind races back to earlier that morning when she had been sipping tea in her apartment, scrolling through emails and mentally preparing for this trip. It was supposed to be a victory lap, a chance to unwind after months of grueling work. She'd booked the presidential suite herself, splurging on the expense because, damn it, she deserved it. And yet here she is, standing in the middle of this gilded palace, being treated like an intruder. How did it come to this? Why does it always come to this? Greg takes a step closer, his posture aggressive, his jaw clenched. "You think waving some piece of plastic changes anything?" he sneers, his voice loud enough to draw even more attention. "People like you don't belong in places like this." His words hit like a punch to the gut, but Maya refuses to flinch. Instead, she squares her shoulders, her gaze locking onto his with a fierceness that surprises even herself. "People like me," she repeats, her tone icy calm. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Greg hesitates for a fraction of a second, caught off guard by her composure, but quickly recovers. "You know what I mean," he mutters, though there's a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes now. Behind her, someone gasps audibly. A young couple holding hands looks on, wide-eyed, while an older man in a suit shakes his head disapprovingly. Even the concierge, who had been silently observing from behind the counter, shifts uncomfortably. Maya senses the shift in energy, the tide turning ever so slightly in her favor, but she knows better than to let her guard down. This isn't the first time she's faced racism, and it won't be the last. Still, something feels different this time. Maybe it's the weight of everything she's endured up until this point. Or maybe it's the fact that she's holding undeniable proof of her legitimacy in her hand. Whatever it is, she decides then and there that she won't back down. Not today, not here. She turns slightly, addressing the growing audience rather than Greg. "I'm staying in the presidential suite," she announces, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "I paid for it. I earned it. And unless someone here wants to explain why my money isn't good enough, I suggest we move past this ridiculous display." The room falls silent, the kind of heavy quiet that makes your ears ring. For a moment, no one moves. Then, slowly, the older man in the suit steps forward. "Miss," he says, his tone measured but firm, "perhaps we should involve the manager. Surely, there's been some misunderstanding." Greg bristles at the suggestion, his face reddening further, but he doesn't argue. Instead, he glares at Maya as if trying to burn a hole through her very soul. As the concierge picks up the phone to call the manager, Maya allows herself a brief moment to breathe. She notices the way her hands tremble slightly, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She thinks about her mother, who raised her to hold her head high no matter what life threw at her. She thinks about her friends, who would probably tell her to walk away and never look back. But walking away has never been her style, not when there's a fight worth having. So she stays rooted to the spot, chin lifted, ready to face whatever comes next. Because sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about you, it's about everyone watching, waiting to see if justice will prevail. The manager arrives in a flurry of polished shoes and forced smiles, his presence immediately commanding attention. He's a tall man with graying temples and an air of authority that seems rehearsed rather than natural. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asks, his voice smooth but edged with impatience, as if this interruption is nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Maya feels her stomach tighten. She knows how these situations often play out, the dismissive nods, the empty apologies, the subtle blame-shifting that leaves you questioning whether you imagined the whole thing. But she's not about to let that happen today. Not when every pair of eyes in the lobby is trained on her, waiting to see what she'll do next. Before Greg can launch into his version of events, Maya steps forward, holding up the keycard like a shield. "This is my room key," she says firmly, meeting the manager's gaze without flinching. "I booked the presidential suite weeks ago. I walked in here ready to check in, and instead, your staff member assaulted me, verbally and physically." The words feel heavy as they leave her mouth, each one carrying the weight of years of microaggressions and outright discrimination. The manager's smile falters just slightly, his polished demeanor cracking under the pressure of her unwavering stare. "Assaulted you," he echoes, glancing at Greg, who suddenly looks less confident than before. "Is this true?" Greg stammers, his earlier bravado melting away under scrutiny. She was causing a scene," he protests weakly, pointing a finger at Maya as if accusing her might somehow absolve him. "She didn't even have any luggage. How was I supposed to know she was actually staying here?" The accusation hangs in the air, absurd and insulting, but Maya doesn't rise to the bait. Instead, she lets out a short, bitter laugh that draws startled looks from the onlookers. "So because I don't have designer suitcases stacked up like trophies, I must be lying? Is that really the logic we're working with here?" Her tone drips with sarcasm, sharp enough to cut glass. "Maybe next time you should ask for proof instead of jumping to conclusions based on how someone looks." The crowd murmurs in agreement, their collective disapproval palpable. A woman clutching a Louis Vuitton tote whispers something to her companion, shaking her head in disgust. Even the concierge, who had seemed so neutral earlier, avoids making eye contact with Greg. The manager clears his throat, clearly uncomfortable now. "Miss Thompson, I assure you, this kind of behavior is unacceptable," he says, his words carefully chosen. "If there has been a misunderstanding, or worse, we will address it immediately." He turns to Greg, his expression hardening. "In the meantime, perhaps you should step aside while we sort this out." But Maya isn't satisfied yet. "A misunderstanding," she repeats, incredulous. "He slapped me in front of everyone. That wasn't a misunderstanding, it was an attack. And frankly, I'm tired of being told to brush things like this off as if they're no big deal." Her voice cracks slightly on the last word, betraying the raw emotion simmering beneath her composed exterior. For a moment, the room goes completely silent, the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every breath, every heartbeat. Then, unexpectedly, a young girl standing near the cafe pipes up. "You shouldn't hit people," she says matter-of-factly, her small voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "That's mean." The simplicity of the statement hits harder than anything else could have. Everyone turns to look at the girl, who shrugs as if stating the obvious. Maya feels a lump rise in her throat, gratitude and frustration warring within her. It's moments like these that remind her why she refuses to stay silent, not just for herself, but for kids like this little girl who deserve to grow up in a world where fairness isn't negotiable. The manager seems to sense the shift in the room's energy too. His shoulders slump slightly, as if realizing he can't smooth-talk his way out of this anymore. "Miss Thompson," he begins again, his tone softer this time, "please allow me to escort you to your suite personally. We'll ensure that your stay is comfortable, and rest assured, appropriate action will be taken regarding this incident." Maya hesitates, weighing her options. Part of her wants to storm out, to deny them the satisfaction of keeping her business. But another part, a stronger part, knows that leaving would only give Greg the last word. No, she decides. She's going to finish what she started. With a deep breath, she nods curtly. "Fine," she says. "But understand this. If I hear so much as a whisper of disrespect during my stay, I'll make sure the entire city hears about it." The threat hangs in the air, unspoken but understood. The manager nods vigorously, practically tripping over himself to assure her that won't happen. As he gestures for her to follow him toward the elevators, Maya casts one final glance at Greg, whose face is pale and drawn. For the first time since she walked into the hotel, she feels a flicker of triumph, but it's bittersweet, tinged with the knowledge that this fight isn't over. Not by a long shot. The elevator ride to the presidential suite feels surreal, as if Maya is floating through a dream, or maybe a nightmare. The manager stands beside her, rambling on about complimentary champagne and spa services, his words tumbling out in a desperate attempt to smooth things over. But Maya barely hears him. Her mind is elsewhere, replaying the scene downstairs like a broken record. She can still feel the sting of Greg's slap on her cheek, sharp and humiliating, but now it's mixed with something else, a strange kind of clarity. This isn't just about her anymore. It's about every black woman who has been told she doesn't belong, who has had to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. And as much as she wants to retreat into the luxury of the suite and forget the whole ordeal, she knows she can't, not yet. When the elevator doors slide open, revealing the sprawling expanse of the presidential suite, even Maya has to pause for a moment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer a breathtaking view of the city skyline, sunlight streaming in to bathe the room in golden light. Plush furniture, fresh flowers, and a fully stocked minibar scream extravagance, a stark contrast to the ugliness she just endured. For a second, she lets herself imagine what it would have been like to arrive here without incident, to step into this haven and feel nothing but joy. But the fantasy shatters quickly, replaced by the reality that no amount of luxury can erase what happened below. The manager ushers her inside, still talking a mile a minute about how they'll make this right. Maya tunes him out, focusing instead on the weight of the keycard still clutched in her hand. It feels heavier now, not just because of its physical presence but because of everything it represents. Proof of her worth, her place, her right to exist in spaces that people like Greg try to keep exclusive. As the manager finally winds down his speech, promising a formal apology and whatever else he thinks will placate her, Maya interrupts him. "Thank you," she says coolly, her tone leaving no room for further discussion. "I'd like to settle in now." He nods, clearly relieved to escape the situation, and scurries out of the suite, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. She walks over to the window, staring out at the city below. Cars zip along the streets like ants, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her. What should she do next? Should she call the hotel's corporate office? File a police report? Post about the incident online and risk becoming another viral headline? Each option comes with its own set of complications, its own potential fallout. But one thing is certain, she can't let this slide. Not again. Not ever. Her phone buzzes in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It's a text from her best friend, Nia, asterisk, "Hey girl, how's the trip going? Hope you're living your best life." Asterisk. Maya stares at the screen, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. How does she even begin to explain what happened? She types out a quick response, asterisk, "It's complicated. I'll tell you later." Asterisk, before setting the phone aside. She needs time to process, to figure out her next move. But deep down, she already knows what she has to do. An hour later, Maya sits cross-legged on the couch, drafting an email to the hotel's corporate headquarters. Her fingers hover over the keyboard, trembling slightly as she tries to find the right words. She starts with the facts, the date, the time, the name of the staff member who attacked her, but soon finds herself writing more than just a complaint. She writes about the exhaustion of constantly having to prove herself, the frustration of being judged by appearances rather than actions. She writes about the little girl in the lobby whose innocent comment cut deeper than any adult's apology ever could. By the time she finishes, the email is longer than she intended, raw and unfiltered. But it's honest, and that's what matters most. Before hitting send, Maya takes a screenshot of the email and posts it on social media, adding a caption that simply reads, "This is why we still have work to do." Within minutes, notifications flood her phone, likes, shares, comments pouring in from friends and strangers alike. Some express outrage, others offer support, and a few share their own stories of discrimination. Reading through them, Maya feels a surge of emotion, anger, sadness, but also hope. Maybe this isn't just her fight after all. Maybe it never was. By the end of the day, the story has gone viral, sparking conversations far beyond the confines of the hotel lobby. Journalists reach out for interviews, activists praise her courage, and even the hotel issues a public statement condemning Greg's behavior and pledging to implement diversity training. It's not enough to undo the harm done, but it's a start, a crack in the wall that might let some light shine through. As Maya lies in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she allows herself a small smile. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But for now, she lets herself believe that change is possible, and that maybe, just maybe, she played a part in making it happen. The next morning, sunlight streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the presidential suite, painting the room in warm hues. Maya wakes up to a flurry of notifications on her phone, messages from friends, colleagues, and even strangers who have seen her post. Some are cheering her on, calling her brave and inspiring, while others share their own stories of discrimination, each one adding another layer to the collective weight she's been carrying. One message stands out. It's from an older woman named Evelyn, who writes, "I was kicked out of a restaurant in 1968 for sitting at the wrong table. Your courage reminds me that we've come far, but not far enough. Keep fighting." The words hit Maya like a punch to the gut, grounding her in the reality that this fight isn't just hers, it spans generations. She sits there for a moment, clutching her phone, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what's unfolding. Later that day, as promised, the hotel sends a formal apology via email, along with news that Greg has been suspended pending an investigation. They also offer her a full refund and a complimentary stay at any of their locations worldwide. It's a decent gesture, but Maya can't help feeling hollow about it. Apologies don't erase pain, and suspensions don't dismantle systems. Still, she acknowledges the effort, responding with a polite thank you before setting the matter aside, for now. What matters more is the ripple effect her story has created. News outlets pick up the incident, turning it into a national conversation about racism in hospitality. Social media buzzes with hashtags like #BelongAnywhere and #AccountabilityInLuxury, amplifying voices that have long gone unheard. People start sharing photos of themselves checking into high-end hotels, tagging the posts with defiant captions, "I belong here too." As the days pass, Maya finds herself reflecting on everything that's happened. She spends hours on the phone with Nia, unpacking her emotions and strategizing how to use this moment to push for real change. "You could turn this into something bigger," Nia suggests during one call. Like, why not talk to them about implementing actual policies? Not just training videos, but real accountability measures. The idea plants a seed in Maya's mind. Why stop at calling out injustice when she can help shape solutions? That night, she drafts a proposal outlining steps the hotel chain could take to address systemic bias, from hiring practices to guest interactions. She includes personal anecdotes, research data, and actionable recommendations, determined to make it impossible for them to ignore. When she submits the proposal to the corporate office, she doesn't expect much, just a pat on the back and maybe a generic response thanking her for her input. So when they invite her to meet with their executive team to discuss her ideas, she's caught off guard. The meeting takes place over Zoom, with suits filling the screen as executives introduce themselves one by one. At first, Maya feels out of place, her casual sweater and natural hair contrasting sharply with their polished appearances. But as she begins presenting her proposal, her nerves fade. She speaks passionately, weaving together statistics and lived experiences, making it clear that this isn't just theoretical, it's deeply personal. By the time she finishes, there's silence on the other end of the line, followed by slow nods and murmurs of agreement. One executive, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, leans forward and says, "This is exactly the kind of leadership we need right now." The conversation marks the beginning of something transformative. Over the following weeks, Maya works closely with the hotel chain to develop a comprehensive diversity initiative. They agree to implement mandatory anti-bias training, create a hotline for reporting discriminatory behavior, and establish partnerships with organizations focused on racial equity. It's not perfect. Maya knows meaningful change takes time, but it's progress, and that's enough for now. Along the way, she becomes a reluctant public figure, invited to speak at conferences and panel discussions about her experience. Each time she steps onto a stage or sits down for an interview, she feels a mix of pride and vulnerability, knowing that her story has become a catalyst for broader conversations. Months later, Maya returns to the same hotel, this time greeted warmly by staff who recognize her name and express gratitude for the changes she inspired. As she walks through the lobby, she notices subtle differences: a new sign welcoming guests of all backgrounds, employees wearing pins that read, "Respect starts here." It's small, but it means something. When she reaches the front desk, the concierge hands her a note from the manager. In it, he thanks her for holding them accountable and assures her that they're committed to doing better. For the first time since that fateful day, Maya feels a sense of closure, not because the world is fixed, but because she played a part in nudging it closer to justice. That evening, as she stands on the balcony of the presidential suite overlooking the city lights, Maya allows herself to reflect on the journey. She thinks about the little girl in the lobby, whose innocent comment planted a seed of hope in a room full of tension. She thinks about Evelyn, whose decades-old memory reminded her of the resilience passed down through generations. And she thinks about herself, the woman who refused to shrink, who chose to stand tall even when it felt easier to walk away. Tears well up in her eyes, but they're not tears of sadness. They're tears of resolve, of gratitude, of belief in the possibility of a better tomorrow. Because sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about you, it's about everyone watching, waiting to see if the world can be a little kinder, a little fairer than it was yesterday.